Katee, it's so good to see you again. How are you?
I am so good, Chris. I'm staring at your wall behind you and trying to see everything. I don't have my glasses on, but I love
There's
it.
there's so much more. I have way too much stuff. I gotta get rid of some things. It's bad. Um, Curious. First question: were you familiar at all with Watchmen before you came on board as Laurie?
I was for sure, absolutely. I'd seen the book, but I also had seen the film and was a huge fan, and thought that they really did a wonderful job with it. And so I was curious what this was going to be like, and when I found out that the idea was to keep it true to the book, I was really excited.
And it does such a good job. I mean, I watched this with my son the other night. And he's 17, by the way, so it's not like weird.
You're like, I
But
watched this with my 8-year-old.
I
It was
watched this with
great.
my 6-year-old son. Just covering his eyes when the blue comes on screen.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
Now, you recently voiced Poison Ivy as well. So, how did you approach making their voices distinct, and what are some key differences you focus on when portraying like what I imagine are two very different kinds of characters?
Yeah, for sure. Very, very different. I think, you know, one of the things that I try to do with these characters, these women, Poison Ivy for me was misunderstood. There's so much vulnerability in her, so much pain, so much anger. Those are really important things for me to bring to life with her. Um, Laurie, I think, has a lot of self doubt, a lot of vulnerability, a lot of pain. And I think that that was something that I really wanted to sort of hold on to for her and make that her through line is this, we've all, I say we've all, I have been in a situation where I loved somebody with all my heart and you didn't feel like I was enough. Um, and that's an awful feeling. It's a terrible, terrible feeling. And so I held on to that. That was my like thing with her. Like that was the thing that I kept coming home to. And I think that you hear it in her voice a lot.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that came across. I'm very excited for chapter two, to be honest. I want to see what you do there. As soon as it was over, I was like, no, no, I gotta wait.
I know. I had the same reaction.
Um,
I was like, how long do we have to wait?
Now, after this experience with Watchmen, are you hopeful they adapt Doomsday Clock so you can voice Laurie again, or am I projecting what I personally want too much?
I mean, you have my permission, Chris, to project that all you want.
Well,
Yeah.
I talked to Brandon and he was like, if they give me the go ahead, like let's do Doomsday Clock. And that's I would love to see this continuation of characters and into that. I think that would be amazing. Speaking of projection, I don't want to directly ask you if Bo-Katan will be in Mandalorian and Grogu, but she has to be, right? Can we just say she has to be and just put that into the universe?
I love your projections, Chris. I think it's fantastic. But like, number one, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. And if I did tell you, that'd probably kill me. So
I'm just gonna take that as I'm gonna keep hope. That's all I'm gonna keep my optimism wrangled up and just shoot it forward. Now, one last question though that I do want to
yeah.
ask you is that you brought up Zack Snyder's Watchmen and how you watched that film. And it's a really solid job of adapting Watchmen in live action. But what's something you feel like this animated film does better or offers up that fans haven't already seen before?
So I agree with you that Snyder's was a phenomenal interpretation.
Mhm.
And I loved it. I loved it. It's part of why I wanted to do this because it inspired me and made me sort of like, my imagination the wheels start to go. But I think that for fans of the book, this it feels important. This feels like a true to the story telling. And that's what I think people will love about it. I think they'll really enjoy this.
Yeah, that's what I'm loving about it. I love talking to you. Thank you so much, Katee, for your
Aw,
time. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
Sir, it's such an honor to meet you, man. I'm a huge fan of your work and I loved Watchmen. It's awesome. So to voice Rorschach, what exactly were you gargling to keep the vocal cords healthy?
I know. I always say I go back to when Mercedes McCambridge was cast to do the voice of Pazuzu in The Exorcist, and she was chain smoking cigarettes and eating and drinking raw eggs and stuff. Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. And people assume that because I have a lower register voice that it would be, but it's not supported by any of the stuff they teach you in drama school, because it's all in the throat. So it actually goes against all the things that you're told not to do, because you'll destroy your voice. So I can only record for a couple of hours at a time, but it was a lot of fun. I can tell you that.
I
And
could.
finding the voice was interesting. Obviously, there was the template of Jackie, and I wanted to pay homage to him, but also make it my own in some way. And so that was a challenge, but that was also it was the great epiphany when we all went, that's it, and then we stayed with it and went through.
No, I was super impressed with it. I was like, man, this guy's gargling gravel right now. How is he doing this? This is amazing. And this kind of leads into my second question because you mentioned Jackie, but I wanted to know, were you familiar with Watchmen before coming on board as Rorschach? So did you even know the comic book and everything?
Yeah, very well. I'm a huge collector. I have been since the 1960s. I have a storage container, to the ceiling filled with sideshow collectibles and original comics. And I remember very distinctly because I had been a huge collector in the 60s and the 70s, and then I think for a minute I thought it wasn't cool to read comics when I was around 17. I kind of stepped away from it, and then a friend of mine dropped Dark Knight Returns into my lap, and that was followed by a copy of Watchmen. So, from when it first came out, I've read it a bazillion times, and when they started to show me some assembled stuff, I was blown away because my concern is, and this is nothing against the CG animation, but it has a very distinctive look, and in order to recreate the book, there's no easy task. There's a reason that when you do cell animation with CG, it takes a couple of years.
Mhm.
And their rendering of this is spot on. I mean, it's basically the panels,
It's so good.
they
Yeah.
come to life. And I'm truly honored to be a part of this.
Now, there's another detective you're famous for playing, and I was curious, in what ways do you feel like Rorschach is both similar or different from Bosch?
Well, I think the similarity is that Rorschach is relentless in the same way that Harry Bosch is. I mean, there's a kind of obsessive nature to the character, and even his attire is a throwback to the gumshoes, the fedora and the raincoat and all of that, and um, Harry Bosch obviously is not as dark as Rorschach, but there's a weird similarity coming from a really bad and traumatic childhood. Um, you know, there are some similarities there, but that's what made it kind of fun. Was doing that. I've always said I don't know why somebody doesn't do an animated series of Bosch. Would be really cool if they could pull that off. But I'd be a purist, man. I'd say, well, it's got to be cell animation.
Speaking of old Bosch, any word on when fans might be getting the third season of Legacy?
We don't have a date yet. I have to imagine that it will come sometime in 2025, hopefully early in 2025. They're shooting the spinoff Ballard with Maggie Q, and we introduced her character Renee Ballard in our 10th episode of Bosch Legacy in this season 3 that's yet to come out. So I imagine they'd want to kind of try to release those within some proximity of each other. And um, I'm shooting this week on the first episode. I'm contracted to do 3 episodes for this first season of Ballard. So yeah, I hope we get some sense of a release date, but that would be my suspicion. It would be somewhere around there.
Hell yeah.
Fingers crossed. But
Well,
all
that's
I can say in advance is that, um, our producers every year just seem to raise the bar on themselves, and so I'm excited for this third season to come out because I think it's truly one of the best, and I mean, including Bosch in the 10 years that we've been doing this, it's a really really substantive season for us.
well, I can't wait, dude. And it was a pleasure to get to talk to you. The Town, one of my all-time favorite movies. I
Oh,
really
thank you,
appreciate it, man. So thank you very much for your time.
thank you, thanks for having me.
Brandon, it is so nice to meet you, man. I absolutely loved chapter one. It was fantastic. If I had one minor criticism, not enough blue, you know what I mean?
Well, maybe there'll be more in part two.
Chapter two, I can't wait. No, seriously though, was there anything that WB Animation asked you to pull back on, or were you surprised at how much you got away with here?
I wouldn't say I was surprised. No, I think, when the project was brought to me by Sam Register and Peter Girardi, my bosses at Warner Brothers Animation, the entire goal from day one was to try to make the truest comic book experience possible in an animated medium. And that was a challenge that I really loved, but also the whole company embraced. We've all read the book. All of my bosses are deep fans of the material and knew what they were asking. It's not like, I started to adapt the book and we have a big blue naked guy and they're like, what is this? No, nobody said that. So certainly there were a lot of challenges in the adaptation along the way, but everybody was really up for the challenge and no surprises.
Now, obviously, Zack Snyder's Watchmen was already a very close adaptation of the book, but this is even more faithful than that. So what did Zack leave out that you were most excited to bring to the screen?
Um, I don't know. I really trust what Zack made. That was his adaptation, and that's what his team made. And I don't want to second guess anything that he did. I thought that was a really great movie, and we tried to make another really great movie in a different medium. And I think that's what excited me was that I think there are things in the animation medium that are different than things you can do in live action, different than things you can do in the printed medium. Obviously, Watchmen is a book known to be a story that is unadaptable to film. There are brilliant page layouts in their 9-panel grids, like just honestly magic that they work in the panels that, yes, they cannot be adapted to film. But there are things that we can do in film that cannot be done on the page.
Right.
And so to me, that was the fun of this. Was really digging in, trying to capture the spirit of the book, but show it to people in a different way so that hopefully if you're a fan of the book, you're just going to see it in a different way. Or even if you're not a fan, if you've never seen the book before, I hope this really brings you into the world in a way that entices you to go pick up the book and look at the story as it was originally told.
No, I'm personally speaking. I mean, the whole sequence with Dr. Manhattan and how you're sort of trying to get an understanding of how he sees time is just, I mean, masterfully done. I mean, it was so good the way that you guys did that sequence. I loved it. Now that you've tackled this, is Doomsday Clock something you'd be interested in adapting next?
I'm game for. I'm a big DC fan, so yeah, I'd be game for doing something like that. I think it would be great because we've already built so many of the designs. We've built this world, and Dave Gibbons' art was such an inspiration for us in building this world. I mean, it's always sad for us as the artists to have done all this work to build this amazing world, especially everything that Dave Gibbons designed, and then just walk away from it and never go back. So yeah, a lot of us, I think Doomsday Clock was on our mind. There's been some other spinoffs from Watchmen. We would love to, if Warner Brothers is game for it, then I think anybody on the art team would sign up immediately because we had a blast translating this book.
When you talk about other Watchmen spinoffs, is there a particular character that you would find the most interesting to explore further?
Honestly, no. I really got into every single character. I mean, that's a credit to the original book and the writing and Dave's art is that I think every character is incredibly just absorbing. Like you just want to jump into their lives and find out more about what makes them tick. No pun intended. um, but yeah, I think there are more stories that we could tell there. And if DC is on board and Warner Brothers and Dave Gibbons, man, I'd love to dig in more.
Thank you so much for your time. I loved it. Me and my son watched it the other night, and it's fantastic. He's 17. It wasn't inappropriate,
Yeah.
so he can handle it. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I got to say, Batman Under the Red Hood, all-time favorite DC animated
Oh,
film.
cool.
I mean, you do fantastic work, so I really appreciate getting to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was another great script that was fun to adapt. I've been lucky. I've got some really good stories to adapt, I got to say.
You're very humble. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.